Okay. So I've got the absolute pleasure to be joined now for our next... Hang on, hair in my mouth. For our next talk, we have got Kirkland Eaton, who's Analog Shift. We've got Tanya Edwards, Collectability co-founder. We've got Jess Chow, who's Viren founder. And Corley Backrack, who's at Tiny Wrist Check, collector, curator, seller, all-round watch girly. Cool. So I'd like to let you say a little bit about your journey into watch world. What brought you here? If you go on, Tanya.
Start with me.
Yeah.
I just want to say that I've been in the watch industry for over 35 years, and this is the first time I've been in a group with just women. Thank you, men who are here. So it just goes to show it's a male industry. Anyway, I started my career in watches 100 years ago when I was at college, and I was in Geneva because at the time I was dating a guy whose father was a watchmaker, and I had to go to Patek Philippe to understand what the world's finest watchmaker was all about. I can assure you that as a college girl, I was not interested. And I was hugely embarrassed to have to walk into this very posh store with jeans and no money. And I walked out and said, one day I will own a Patek. And it happened. So fast forward a few years, and I was transferred from London to New York and for a PR agency, and they were pitching the Patek Philippe business, but they didn't call it Patek Philippe, they called it Patek Philippe. And did anyone know anything about it? And I said, I do, and I can also tell you how to pronounce it properly. So I started working on the PR side of the business. I got to know the owners of the company. It's a family-owned company, so I got to know the Sterns. I got to know people around the world because it was an international piece of business. And they asked me to join the company in New York as marketing director. So that's how I started. And I founded a company with John Reardon, who is one of the world's leading experts on Patek Philippe. And I met John 27 years ago when I went to an auction at Sotheby's to try and buy then the world's most complicated watch, which sold for $10 million, which I can assure you in 1999 was an enormous amount of money. And anyway, then he wanted to work at Patek. I was given the job because I was then vice president of giving him the job. And we've worked at Christie's together. And one day we said, we'll start a company together because we both have such a passion for vintage timepieces, and we did. So we're 6 years old now.
I love that. What watch are you wearing today? I'm wearing, obviously, a Patek. Yeah, obviously.
I'm wearing a watch that people don't expect me to wear, which is a teeny, tiny little watch from the early 1940s. And people who see me normally know that I wear a lot of men's watches just because I like complicated watches, but they're not. This I love. I think it's so sweet.
Gorgeous. So my name's Kirkland Eaton. My current title is Senior Manager of Sales and Commercial Development at Analog Shift, which is the official pre-owned and vintage entity of Watches Switzerland. So Wednesday was actually my 6th anniversary at Watches Switzerland. So I've been a watch girly for 6 years now. I came from fashion. I was trying to break into the luxury world. I never in a million years thought I would still be doing this. I told everybody, I was like, yeah, I'll do this watch thing for like 6 months, a year, whatever. I'll dip. And here we are, and I could not imagine myself anywhere else. My journey did start in retail, which I think is really, really important. So I worked in 3 stores. I worked in our Soho location. I ran a pop-up in the Hamptons one summer, and then I also worked at Hudson Yards. So I've seen it all, and now I run the entire vintage and pre-owned department. I travel to all of the U.S. stores. I train everybody. I buy watches. I sell watches. I do a little bit of everything. But, you know, being in the vintage watch space makes sense for me. I love vintage things. I like vintage clothes, vintage handbags, and it just kind of fell in my lap, and I feel like I'm in the perfect place. And I think we should all introduce our watch. So I'm wearing a 1970s JLC. It has a Piaget movement manual wine cocktail watch. A really interesting story. I'll tell you guys later if you come up and ask me, but how I acquired it was getting bumped off of a flight, and the American Airlines paid for it. So there you go.
Here's hoping us on the way home.
That's so impressive. Hi, I'm Courtney. I guess my journey with watches started majority as a collector. My father was a big collector, so it was the joke of I would kind of go along with my dad when my mom tried to get us both out of the house, and my father used to hand me what I now know to be 1920s Art Deco inspired cocktail watches, but we used to call princess watches when I was a child, which was like watches have just really been intertwined to growing up, and it was a part of my family lore and all my happiest memories have to do with vintage watches. And I worked in business development and strategy at different luxury companies. I'm a very data-driven person, and I've worked at auction houses. I've worked in entertainment. And frankly, when my father got sick and passed away, I really dove into watches. And so weird. I created Tiny Wrist Check as kind of like a joke, because I would go to men's collectors meetups, and a lot of like people you don't want to give your personal Instagram to would ask me for my Instagram, and I created it just to talk about watches. And it's grown pretty exponentially since I think I started in August, and I looked at like 40,000 followers. And it's not because of my sparkling personality. It's because women want to talk about watches, and it's been a really interesting journey. So these days I do a lot of sourcing for women. I do just starting to work with brands a ton, and so similar to what I was doing before, but now I'm really focused in on watches. So it's nice to be able to put my passion and my expertise together. Oh, and I'm wearing I'm wearing a 1986. It's the watch that my father dropped at my mother's, in my mother's lap the day I was born. And the like family joke is that it's a beautiful Rolex diamond bezel. I love it. But the funny joke about it was that my father turned, my mom was like, "Here, I have this watch for you." And she's like, "I have a naked baby on me." Okay. And then she turned to him, she goes, "Yeah, but where's yours?" And he looked at her and he's like, "It's at the office." So that's my family.
Hi everyone, I'm Jess Chow. I'm founder and CEO of Viren. My watch journey really started before I was born. My mom and my dad are both in the watchmaking business and have been for over 50 years. They actually met at Basel Worlds in the 80s, so it's really in my blood, and I think I bring a very unique perspective. As a child, we used to travel around the world visiting watch factories, so I got a very behind-the-scenes look growing up, and it was something that I really fell in love with. After I pursued a career in business as a management consultant, and it's always been a dream of mine to start a brand of my own. So after I turned 30, I really pursued that after I met my business partner, Sunny Fong. He's our creative director, someone that actually won Project Runway Canada, and a fashion designer by trade. So he's really bringing in the fashion side, whereas I'm bringing in the watch side to create Viren. And I guess 6 is the magic number today. It's been 6 years, and I'm very proud to share that I'm Canada's first and only female founder of a luxury watch brand. So happy to be here to represent.
And I'm lucky enough to wear one of Jess's, so if you want to see, it's absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
So to dive into it straight away, I guess, for years, I think we can all agree that it's been the case of pink it, shrink it, stick diamonds on it. So what are you seeing? I always say that, but it sounds like a euphemism for something. What are we seeing? Are we seeing women actively reshape the watch design market? And is there any recent clear examples that you can anecdotally pull out?
Okay, as you've all gathered, I can only talk about Patek Philippe, so I'm terribly sorry. But historically, it's actually quite important. And I think it's important that all of us here, all women, know that women have influenced watches for a very, very long time. From the 1800s, women influenced how watches looked. And in fact, the earliest known wristwatches were designed by women for women. And I think that is a critical point to know. And another factor is that the number one selling watch for Patek Philippe is not a Nautilus. It is a 24. It is a lady's watch. So again, let's pay attention to that, because way back in 1999, when the 24 came out, I was working for the company, so it's something I know quite well and I'm quite close to. But for the first time in a long time, Patek internally looked at women designers to design a watch for women, because complaints were being made all the time. It's just a men's brand. There's nothing for women. And so they actually asked women to help design a watch, and out came the 24. And it is still today the number one selling watch. And why is that? I think it's because they asked women what they wanted. They designed a watch that women could wear that is called the 24 because it lasts for 24 hours. You can wear it as a cocktail watch at night, or you can wear it in the morning when you take the kids to school, or you can wear it to the gym. You can do what the hell you want. And it's got diamonds on it. So that was okay, a feminine nod, but do we care? No, I love diamonds. So I think that we need to look a bit back in history and be very proud of what women have done with watches. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about that. I hope we do, anyway, during this.
I think in terms of kind of reshaping the industry, I think Cartier is really at the forefront. When I first started, I did not own a watch. And I actually worked a whole year at Watches Switzerland not owning a watch. And I told everybody, I'm going to buy a Cartier. I'm going to buy a Cartier. I think it's so cool, blah, blah. And everybody's like, Cartier sucks. The movements are terrible. You can't buy a Cartier. It's a terrible decision. I ended up buying a Rolex. I bought a vintage two-tone Datejust. And everybody's like, great decision. And now Cartier is the watch. I mean, let's be real. Everybody wants a Cartier.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's celebrity endorsements? Do you think it's the rise of collectors on Instagram that's like, that's the watch that people are seeing most? What do you think it is that's driving Cartier's success?
I do actually think that social media has a play, for sure. But I also think that from an aesthetics perspective, a Cartier is a perfect watch. Whether you want a strap watch, whether you want a bracelet watch, it's something that's timeless. I think the white dial is very chic. It's very striking in a good way. And I think that also it's the association to like almost an old money aesthetic. And you see a lot of these kind of references to people wearing Cartier, and something that Courtney and I were talking about earlier too is this is also a time where we could be looking into Piaget, and I think that vintage Piaget could kind of be the next resurgence of a brand. But I really think that Cartier has done an amazing job of putting watches on the correct wrists, but also keeping a timeless aesthetic and still sticking to their codes. They're not changing things. You can have an 80s tank and a 2026 tank and they look the same.
Do you think there's something as well that they sort of transcend gender in who they appeal to, and the people that the celebrities' wrists they get them on? It's not necessarily, it's men and women. The Timothy Chalamet effect, that everything he touches.
Yes and no. So I think yes, I believe that there is something to be said for the fact that men are looking to smaller watches and it's more like effeminate looks. But to kind of go on this pathway, what I think is really important to realize is that most of design language right now, when it comes to fashion, when you're watching e-news, when you turn on TikTok, how many fashion creators are talking about this piece of clothing that is referential to X, Y, and Z? And if you walk into Aritzia and you walk into Zara right now and you ask those girls what a Cartier Panthère looks like, they know what it looks like. If you ask a lot of people know what Dior under Galliano means. That was not the world X amount, how many ever years ago. And I think that that's and to Cartier's credit, they've done a fantastic job, really. And it's not something they've done just recently. Like, you look at 90s pictures of Gwyneth Paltrow, she looks fucking cool. Like, she does. She looks awesome. And she's wearing a Panthère, and it's a quartz Panthère. Nobody knew. And I think that they've done such a great job of, inserting themselves into the design language. And something else that we were talking about earlier, and where we were discussing Piaget, is, great. You see all the, there's obviously everybody's watching Love Story. I hope you're all watching. It's so great. It's so good. But, but Carolyn Bessette didn't wear jewelry. She wore that watch a handful of times in pictures. But meanwhile, anytime you pull, that reference is straight up on and on and on. And when people ask, what was Jackie Kennedy wearing? She was wearing Stone Dial Piaget. She wasn't wearing a tank all the time. And I think there's something to be said for, and whether it be fantastic marketing and great storytelling, or if it is just the fact that they have created classic, incredible designs. But I think that's a testament to Cartier's ability to weave themselves throughout fashion. Obviously the Panthère was originally Like you go back and back and back. It was a design element that was inserted into their jewelry in the 1920s. So I think that they've done a really great job when it comes to like Art Deco element. You know, they've constantly had their output and their designs be super relevant to the design at the time. And that's something that I feel like a lot of watch brands do sometimes fantastically and sometimes not as fantastically, but women, that is how women purchase.
And just from a designer's point of view, looking at brands like Cartier, is there anything in that you see that you take on board that you find inspirational or maybe want to do the opposite of? Or
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you said about design language, because I think a lot of times we talk about women's watches and it's very one size, but actually there's a breadth of what women like, right? And so for me, for example, I've always really loved menswear. I like to wear men's watches and things that are chunkier. And so it's not necessarily just doing something for women. There's really a vast spectrum in the things that we're interested in. And with Viren, we design gender neutral timepieces, all rectangular, all with a statement case. So it's about kind of highlighting those different shapes and the design language that really celebrate the types of details and the types of craftsmanship that we're all looking for. And I think women are very sophisticated buyers. There's a lot of categories out there that we can buy instead of watches. And so that storytelling element of something that really connects you personally is so important in terms of the product as well as the marketing.
So how has the understanding of the female market changed from a brand perspective? How do you see having a closer relationship with customers in terms of like being able to reach them so easy on social media? How does that influence your design?
Yeah, so my designer, he's actually a women's wear luxury fashion designer. And so we really bring in a lot of those elements, things like fit, things like silhouette, making sure that it actually looks good, not just from the front, but from the back and from the side. We also think about how you're wearing the watch, right? We want to have a piece that you can wear to the grocery store, but also wear to a special event and a wedding. So these timeless pieces that can take you from day to night, really, women today are on the go. I'm running from place to place, probably from city to city. So being able to have that versatility that still look good and you can be proud wearing it and have that confidence is, I think, very important.
And I guess from a secondary market point of view, do you see changes in consumer shopping based on what women want?
I've probably got a question. What do women want? Oh my God, I've no idea. Yeah. And the secondary market, I think what the secondary market has offered for women is an opportunity to buy pieces that they wouldn't normally be able to afford. And we talked a lot about Cartier, and I totally agree with everything that the lady said here. My daughter asked me what watch she should buy when she had her first bonus, and I said, you should buy yourself a Cartier tank. So they're jewelers, remember, they immediately associate with women, and they have that brand name that's really, really important. And you can see that, oh, I'm wearing something that's got a name that people know. So that is important. That is important. But on the secondary market, and I'm sure that there's plenty of women here who would agree that there is so much out there, not from all brands that have been in business for the last however many years, 150, 20, whatever. They've made lots of different designs, and the secondary market lets you have a chance to own one of those designs, including Cartier. I mean, and Patek, absolutely. And there are pieces like the one I'm wearing that are very undervalued at the moment. And I think that that's where women are going to have more choice. And women want choice, but they also want something practical, which is exactly what Jess has been saying and what she's done with her own brand. But I think we're beginning to see women want choice.
I also think that women are very impulsive consumers, myself granted. But, you know, I've sold watches for years now. And, you know, sometimes with men, it's like, hey, I need to go home. I need to think about it. I want to look at my collection. I want to talk to my wife. You always have to include the wife. I tell people, please call your wife. Please call your wife. Let me talk to her. Whereas women, when they want something, they want it now. And I think that's the beauty of the secondary market. You know, you can go, hey, I've decided I want this today. there's options. You can go and try them on and you can buy it same day if you want. Whereas, especially with modern watches, sometimes you have to go in. This is not something you can buy immediately. This is something you're going to have to wait for. We don't want to wait. We might not even like it in 6 months.
So what do you think is the disconnect there between like modern brands in talking to the consumer that secondary market finds more of a space there? Do you think there's a disconnect that something's not clicking with contemporary brands maybe?
My personal opinion is pricing. You can buy a vintage gold Cartier under $20,000. You can buy, vintage Patek Philippe's under $20,000, and then you walk into a retail store to buy one brand new. And I mean, the entry level, especially on gold, is going to starts with a 3 at minimum. And I do think that the trend is moving towards gold. I think that people obviously are still buying steel watches, but in a market like New York, you see people that are waiting a little longer and buying gold versus, hey, I'm going to buy this steel now and get rid of it later and buy gold. I have people saying, I'd rather wait and spend the extra, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000.
Yeah, cool. As someone that collects, what do you...
So I'll say from two perspectives. As somebody who's been seriously collecting for quite some time, for me at least, I gravitate much towards vintage models. But I'll say this, there was a vintage AP with a stone dial that I've been absolutely obsessed and in love with, and it was about $20K for a while, and I was like, I'll get it. And when I had heard that that AP was coming out with their new 2 stone dials, and especially after, and this was like a model from the 80s, and after the frosted minis did so well, I thought to myself, I'm never going to be able to afford that thing again. And it went from $20,000 to $89,000 within, and it's true. And listen, now working on the side of dealing, the second somebody tipped me off that Piaget was going to re-release that 2-tone polo, you better believe I went out and bought 4 of them. There's, and again, that's referential. That's 80s power dressing. That's, I do think that, again, so much of fashion is referential these days that I think that there's something to be said for really diving through the archives. And, I do work with a handful of wonderful women who are collectors or just starting to collect and kind of more on education with what else is out there. And a couple of them, I love this Serpenti. It's amazing. And it's like, yeah, the Serpenti is incredible. But have you seen these Piaget cuffs that are incredible? The 70s Piaget cuffs. And there's such a story, and we keep talking about it, but there's such a story to be told there with the Piaget Society and with they're just incredible. I feel like there's not really the structure to tell the stories about watches that there could be. And I said it as a joke earlier. I have all these followers and I don't, there's 63% women, which is amazing for me. I figured it'd be a bunch of creeps, frankly. I did. And, this is all that side of it. And I'm not super comfortable talking in front of a camera. I'm not super comfortable being forward facing, but I could talk about watches all day. And I do know that my understanding of watches and my knowledge of watches comes from growing up with a parent who was collecting. And something as simple, and I wish I could remember which creator, but I'll remember it and post her like crazy, but there's a woman who talked about the cocktail watch. So Jennifer Lawrence wore this 1916, launching its cocktail watch to the Golden Globes. And then there was this resurgence of the cocktail watch. And one of these creators said, I want the resurgence of the cunty cocktail watch. And I was like, that is brilliant. But think about it. If you want, especially the price of gold, you see what's going on with diamonds, the idea of buying your girlfriend, if you're going to buy something, vintage, buying her a vintage Art Deco, gorgeous cocktail watch is so much cooler. And I feel like there's all these stories that have a place to be told, and just it's working on the structure to get there.
I guess, Jess, from a designing point of view, what do you feel like you've got some sort of responsibility to talk to women and find out? Did you want to say something on the foot forward? What do you think you feel like responsibility as a new brand designer, taking inspiration from those sort of influences too?
Absolutely. I was going to say, as a modern brand, we really like to have that intersection between old and new. We really celebrate a lot of the beautiful heritage design codes. For example, with Viren, we have an integrated bracelet that a lot of people are like, oh, we don't make bracelets like this anymore, right? Because it's old school, as well as bringing in a lot of those nods. So I'm wearing steel stereo diamond today. It's actually inspired by Studio 54 vibes. There's a lot of motifs in there that are inspired by analog stereo speakers. And so we try to actually reimagine parts of the movement as well as the actual craftsmanship. So on this model, instead of a traditional date disc where you have the number going around, what we did was we actually etched the numbers of the month around the outside bevel. And there's actually a white line that goes around and spins as you go through the month. And it resembles that of like a volume dial on an analog speaker. So really marrying that heritage design codes, but also with a modern design aesthetic that hopefully is more relevant to today's consumers and can really tell a fun story with watchmaking as well. Doesn't need to always be so serious.
I just want to say that everyone here has said one word that's so magic to me, which should be magic to everybody, which is education. And you're all nodding, which is wonderful. We need to educate ourselves about watches. They don't just tell us the time. They have an extraordinary history. And just from a design perspective, we've seen everything from in the sort of between the wars. The First World War and the Second World War was Art Deco time, was Art Nouveau, it was Bauhaus. People were playing with different shapes, and some of the most interesting shaped watches were made during those early years because people didn't know what a wristwatch would look like, because then before that it was pocket watches which were round. So what shape is a wristwatch? I have no idea. Let's play with every single shape. And if we educate ourselves, we will learn so much more about what is out there. And we're all been agreeing here that vintage does matter because they have different price points. And so I'm going to say it, you've heard me say it now, but some of the most undervalued watches are women's watches. Watches that were made for women from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s.
Why is that?
That's such a good question. Why is that? And it's because they haven't had attention, because women haven't been giving them attention.
So do you think that
There isn't a market value for them because there's not demand for them, but that's changing. And we're hearing that here with Piaget and everything.
What do you think men's responsibility in that highlighting women's watches to the market? Because like in the previous talk, they're in the positions of C-suites, that's, influence comes down from the top. Do you think there's not been enough time from brands given to look at the female archive perspective?
I think for the higher end watches, it takes so long to bring out a new design, forget it. It's going to take 5 to 10 years. So that's too late. Trends change every day. We've seen that. And I think from my perspective, the biggest influence is not men running companies, it's influencers. And it's celebrities. And whatever, and it's because of social media. So as you've gathered, I'm very old. I've been in the industry for a long time. And I gave a quote to a friend over there recently, which was, I've been in the industry for over 30 years, and I have seen the biggest changes in the past 5.
Yeah, for sure.
And why is that? Social media. That's brought us all here. That's brought us into the conversation. And, it really matters what celebrities wear and what influencers are telling us to wear. Everybody knows the Nautilus is this stupid watch that everybody wants. But Hailey Bieber last year was photographed wearing a Nautilus, a lady's Nautilus with diamonds, and her phone was ringing off the hook. How do I get one? Well, we've got one, but you're going to have to pay a lot of money for it. But that changed things. Anyway, sorry.
No, I mean, it really does. And I think it's because women are consuming that media. Do I think that men are on social media trying to find their next watch buy? Not necessarily. They might be like, oh, I admire this guy. He makes a lot of money and he's wearing this watch. Maybe influence there. But, we sold a watch recently to a very TikTok famous jewelry influencer. It's a gorgeous Benoir, has a very unique bracelet. I get calls daily. People are like, I'll pay double, triple what she paid. And it's something that we legitimately cannot find any more of. And I mean, I'm pushing people away. I'm like, sorry, I can't take your money. I wish I could. And it's just from somebody with, 500,000 followers on TikTok. This is something that brands, something that brands really should be tapping into, because we are looking and we're consuming. And I saw something the other day, we are really in a moment where people are kind of copy and pasting, unfortunately. And is that a negative thing? Not necessarily, but in this era of social media, women's presence wearing watches is more important than we think.
Go on, Courtney.
I think I've spoken enough, but I mean, the answer is yes, of course. I mean, listen, the Nautilus is incredible and has, and also Victoria Beckham looks pretty damn cool in them. But it's all of these things. Yeah, it's all of these things. Yes, but it's also, again, like so much of social media, forgetting the fact that, and let's just focus on like fashion and design. Social media is on education, so you can open the fact that I was talking to somebody in my family who's 13 and she knew what a 90s Fendi baguette was. Like, I looked at her like, what? She's like, this is what I want. I was like, excuse me. Like, it was like, but she knew what the dupes looked like. And I feel like dupe has its own connotation, but there's one thing when you say this is aesthetically like this incredible piece of jewelry that I'm going for, but even Bulgari, there are dupes all over the place. So whether it be dupes as like a lower priced item that has a similar aesthetic, let's look at it that way. There isn't a lot of people on social media talking about watches in a structure that makes it understandable, because there's, it's just not something that is penetrated as well. But that being said, I do think that, and maybe it's because I'm data driven and I'm a bit of a capitalist when it comes to stuff like this, I think that money drives the market. And at the end of the day, like women interested in, like us all being here, like brands, I mean, obviously brands are noticing. And I think that showing up, engaging in conversations, that is driving the market, which is fantastic, but it does take a minute.
And just to build on that, I think there's the education piece in terms of different styles of watches, but also in terms of movement and how watches are created. We are 100% automatic. The idea really is that with an automatic watch, you're really powering it with your own energy. And so we actually use it as motivation for us to get out there and pursue their passions. I talk to a lot of my friends, and most of them don't know what an automatic watch is. Really that education piece, and after they learn about it, they are so much more inspired to get into it. And I really do think is very consumer driven. The more women that are asking questions and wanting to spend money and wanting to buy are going to be driving the business choices behind a lot of these brands. And it is cool to be able to continue to kind of share this dying craft in some ways. And I always say, when AI kicks over the world, like everyone needs to have a mechanical watch on their wrist. Anything is going to be working.
Right. And I guess one of my last questions, it turned out to be quite a divisive one when we did this in London on Monday. The idea of women's watches, is that something that's actually become outdated in itself category-wise? We've seen so much men wearing smaller cocktail watches and the vintage movement, that sort of thing. Do you think brands should move towards a more universal language in terms of product segmentation? What do you think about the split there, female, men?
Personally, I think yes. I don't think we should be putting a gender on a watch. And something to think about, like we are a part of the 1%, and not the 1% in terms of, monetary value. We're a part of the 1% that we are a part of the industry, right? So, those kind of things don't bother us. But, you go somewhere maybe like the Midwest, right? Maybe someone is looking at a smaller watch and their mother, their parent, their sibling, their friend, whatever, is like, oh, that's a women's watch. You can't wear that. And so I think that because when we are gendering watches, it creates this connotation that you can't wear that, you can't wear this. And I think it's really important to, even give them different names, right? Like you can call something a cocktail watch. It's not a lady's watch, it's a cocktail watch. It's teeny tiny. It has a purpose. You wear it to cocktail events, right? We don't need to call like a large, men's chronograph anything other than a chronograph. It's a chronograph. If you like how it looks on your wrist, that's all that matters. And I am a big believer in, I feel like I'm pretty educated on watches. The one thing I do not care about is millimeter. If I'm in a sales presentation and someone's like, what's a millimeter? I'm like, I don't care. Does it look good on your wrist?
I just want to say thank you for saying that.
I mean, look, my name being Tiny Wrist Check came because I love wearing either tiny pieces or very large like men's watches, and I would go to events and I had put on like a Vacheron 222, and somebody was like, "Oh, your wrist is too tiny for that," and it like, excuse please, and the attitude came out. It was like a thing, but you know, I don't love the idea of saying women's and men's watches, but at the end of the day, whatever will get whoever's working in product to start diversifying their offerings is fantastic. And no, I don't love it being called a men's or a woman's watch, especially when I wear what is typically a man's watch. But I do hope that we will get to the point where it is, again, like focused on whatever the aesthetics are. I do think that whatever way that we can get people to focus on the variety of offerings out there, fantastic. But yeah, I think calling something a man's or women's watch is a little silly.
You need to answer that one. No, I think you've really hit it on the head with your.
Oh, thank you. I think as with many other industries, fashion included, you know, it started historically in a very gender segregated field, and now everything is kind of meshing a lot more, and you're really seeing that spectrum. We really designed our watches to be gender neutral, inspired by things like modernist architecture, because these are things that are really timeless. And a timepiece that is sitting on your wrist, as you guys mentioned, is not necessarily men's or women's. It's really about the design codes and those details that are put in there. So I do think that we are hopefully trending into a direction where we don't need to be putting these qualifiers, but the watch industry is a little bit slower moving than some of the other industries. It really takes a lot of new voices and hopefully new perspectives to be able to shift that in a quicker pace for today's generation.
Bravo!
With that, has anyone got any questions? Girls, you answered it all.
Can we solved it? Yeah.
I just want to say something that you've gathered, that I'm in the business of vintage watches, very expensive vintage watches, and I worked out that out of the top 10 clients, our top 10 clients, 3 of them are women. The number 1 is a woman. She's American. She could be anywhere in this room. She's not, happens not to be. But you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know that when you met her. She's very like us. She's just down to earth, you know? She just is very sophisticated in what she likes, and she will put down 7 figures on a watch if she likes it. Yes, she's immensely wealthy, but so she has that advantage. But I just think the point is that she loves watches and she buys what she loves. And that's what I think we've all agreed on here, is that there isn't a gender issue anymore. There is buy what you love. And that's what we tell every one of our collectors: buy what you love. Don't ask me how much is it going to be worth in 10 years time, in 1 year time. Now, people forget 10 years. Everyone wants to know what's it going to be worth next month. But, and we go, no, that's not the point. Buy what you love. And women are very good at doing that, which we've all said.
Yes.
And I think women are going to lead things. I've always believed that. But look at what we're doing. Look at how people are paying attention to us now. And it's up to us to keep the momentum going.
Yeah, just to build on that, I think women is so diverse as well. You know, someone as a woman of color representing the industry, love to kind of see more of those voices, not just, grouping us into one group, but even the panel here, we bring such different perspectives, and it's great to hear all the different facets that this industry brings.
And I think it's really important what you're doing because, like I said to you earlier, you are providing something at an accessible price point, which is really important. And I think that it's really easy to forget about accessibility. And, how often do people say, oh, I really want to watch, under 2,000, right? And you have to be like, oh my gosh, what options are there? And it's really impactful that is an option.
Thank you. No one else? Oh yeah, go for it. That's me. The corner over here.
Hi, I'm Miranda from the Horological Society, and I want to say thank you so much for all of your thoughtful answers and to the previous panel. I've really enjoyed this a lot. My question is about your answer to the kind of are there men's and women's watches? Should there be men's and women's watches? And I really appreciated your perspective on that. I think one thing that modern brands sometimes do is they say, oh, we're not going to have a women's watch. It'll all be unisex. But really what they mean is we just have one large watch and women can wear it also, which works for some people really well and some people not so well. So I was wondering if there are strategies you can think of for kind of either marketing new watches or vintage watches that can be more unisex without kind of just erasing women's roles and women's watches and traditionally women's watches, and just kind of saying that something that is traditionally a man's watch, well, women can wear it now, which also has a downfall to that too. So I was wondering if you could talk to either modern strategies or vintage watches and kind of how you would promote them in that arena.
I mean, I think it's really important on who is in the ad and who we're putting the watch on, right? You know, how often is the ad of a chronograph a man driving a car? Why can't it be a woman driving a car? Why can't it be a woman scuba diving, doing other things? So I think it's really, but also making it to where it appeals to the entire scope, right? You can have an ad that has a woman in it that can also come off to men as like, hey, I can also wear that, without it being like feminine, girly, I'm wearing a floral dress and, you know, my handbag is pink, right? So I think it's about putting women in real scenarios, especially in ads and in marketing, because brands are so quick to, you know, show this celebrity doing this in this watch and that celebrity doing this in this watch. But, you know, what about the actual people of the world? Courtney?
I kept teasing Irving, like, if I get uncomfortable, I'm just going to be like, what she said. Which I do feel like what you said. It's also kind of what I touched on earlier, right? It's the idea that I don't love the idea of saying men's or women's anything, quite frankly, because I think that everybody has their own aesthetics and something they gravitate towards. And I do joke around and get quoted for saying that women should wear their boyfriend's or partner's watch if they're bigger than them and just throw them over a cup. So there's that. But look, like, I see what you're saying, and I think it's an important point, which is kind of more why I said, like, I'm not so offended by the fact, as long as there is diversity in the product and what we're being offered, meaning not just, you know, like men wear the mini APs and that type of thing, but the fact that they exist and that it's something that's appealing to women is wonderful. I think that a lot of those changes do come with buying power. The more a certain model sells, the more it's going to the more that it'll be available to the market. I do think that takes a minute, but I mean, look, you're completely right when it comes to explaining the history of certain pieces. Again, this all, to me at least, comes down to education, and really learning what the design language is of some of these pieces, understanding, like, I had somebody ask me the other day about a Must Cartier and didn't know that those weren't solid gold. And something as simple as, you know, I love talking about stone dials. Well, a lot of those came during late 60s, early 70s, when, like, we have Grima and Albert coming in with these incredible, beautiful pieces. And, like, yeah, you can throw them away as jewelry watches, but I think that's silly. I do think that there's a lot of this, for me at least, I think comes down to education.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. As the modern brand representation here, we do have a gender neutral case, and I think it's about making sure that the case actually looks good on every single wrist size. We spent over a year developing all of the different angles, how it tapers onto the wrist so that it actually sits really beautifully. With a rectangular watch, it's very easy for it just to, as my mom calls it, a potato. And so making sure those edges and those angles are beautifully situated is important. And just a fun fact, when we were developing the Viren watch, a lot of bracelets came standard, and actually when they first prototyped the watch for me, it didn't fit my wrist because I have an incredibly small wrist as well. And so even with our bracelets, we actually custom designed them so that every single link was removable so that it could actually fit every size wrist. So some of those considerations as you think about a market that has a bigger wrist size or a smaller wrist size is important, not just from a marketing perspective, but also from a design perspective as well.
I just want to say one last thing about marketing and advertising. I can think of one gender neutral ad campaign in the watch industry that's been running for 29 years, and it says, you never actually own a Patek, you really take care of it for the next generation. And the reason that that campaign has lasted so long is because it is true. And it doesn't need to be Patek. It can be any brand you want to put in there, anything. Because owning a watch is emotional. It's an emotional connection that we have with our watch. It matters to us. And if we really love it and it really becomes part of us, it's something that we want to pass on. And I think that that's something that really is the critical part of watches, is that they are gender neutral. It's just an emotion. It's something we love. And come the AI days, we're going to be okay because we've got a mechanical watch on our wrist.
Amazing. Oh, thank you so much. Think you agree. That was a great. It's so cool. Thanks, girls. So I think May's going to come back and do some closing remarks, but thank you all so much for joining me.
Well, yeah, that sadly brings us to the end of today's event. Thank you all so much for joining us. It's your participation here today that makes initiatives like this really meaningful. So we have mimosas at the back, so please do stay, chat, continue the conversation. We have goodie bags as well on the side, so do make sure you grab one of those on your way out. And I'd also love to highlight another thing that we're doing with Women in Watches, which is our Women in Watches list, which will appear in our March print issue. It celebrates 12 incredible leaders in the industry, from watchmaking, education, retail, brands. So do make sure you stay tuned for our latest issue, which is out this weekend. And the whole list will be profiled there. And thank you so much, everybody, for coming here today. Now, enjoy the rest of the event.